Mist, shrouded Paris, 1745. The moon's pale arc glints off rain-slick cobblestones as a solitary carriage creaks to a halt before the forbidding gates of Chateau de Bellegarde. Inside, torchlight flickers across vaulted ceilings and blood-red tapestries stitched with arcane emblems. At the far end of the grand hall, the ancient clock strikes midnight. Fondly, crystal goblets tremble on a silver tray. Guests draped in silk and powdered wigs pause in mid-conversation. All eyes turn to the massive doors, bolted from with a ripple of fear. Shudders through the assembled nobility. Madame Hélas Marceau stands at the center, heart pounding beneath her emerald gown. Her escort, a stern valet, grips her elbow. The air tastes of candle smoke and damp earth. A single echoing footstep resounds from the polished marble floor. Without warning, the doors swing inward on silent hinges. There, framed in the doorway, stands Count Jacques de Saint-Germain, his silver hair cascading over a coat of midnight blue velvet. His penetrating gaze sweeps the hall. In his outstretched hand, he holds a gleaming vial filled with swirling liquid that pulses like starlight. A hush falls. The Count steps forward, each movement as fluid as smoke. The valet reaches for the lock, but with a soft gesture the Count averts him. The bolt slides back as if obeying an unspoken command. Torches gutter and flare emerald, casting warped shadows that writhe like living creatures. Hélas inhales sharply as the Count approaches. His lips curve into a knowing smile. "Mademoiselle," he intones, voice rich with secrets. "The price of eternity is not measured in gold." He raises the vial. The crowd leans in, breath held. A distant thunder echoes through vaulted corridor. Then, with a single bound, the Count vanishes, leaving only the echo of a whisper and the soft clink of crystal on stone. The hall's storm-lashed windows slam shut, sealing the mystery within. Before we unlock Saint Germain's darkest secret, hit subscribe and ring the bell. Then tell us where you're watching from in the comments. Tonight we'll step into 7045 France and reveal the forbidden pact that granted a count eternal life. From candlelit salons to hidden crypts, discover how alchemy, intrigue, and a single vial changed history. Will you dare learn what price was paid for immortality? Stay with us, because once you see the Count's secret, there's no turning back. Héloïse Marceau stood on the marble terrace of the Hôtel de la Paix, her emerald silk skirts brushing the dew-glistened balustrade. Dawn's pale light brushed the rooftops of Paris, gilded by the first rays creeping over Notre Dame's tall spires. Below, the Seine glimmered between barges and sampans unloading exotic spices from Ottoman merchants. Héloïse inhaled the perfume of jasmine and damp stone, heart fluttering with anticipation. Today, she would meet him again, Count Jacques de Saint-Germain, the enigma who had bewitched France's finest salon. A world of splendor and shadows, Paris in 1745 was the glittering heart of Europe's Enlightenment, and its darkest intrigues. Salons buzzed with talk of Voltaire's latest satire, and Rousseau's theories of man's innate goodness. Candles burned through the night over lacquered parlor tables heaped with manuscripts, and crystal decanters filled with cherry brandy. Courtiers draped in velvet embroidered by royal tailors whispered of affairs, duels, and the king's secret edicts. In gilded halls near the Palais Royal, the most influential women of the court, Madame de Pompadour, Mademoiselle de Beauharnais, and Baroness de Crest, vied to host the most brilliant soirée. Héloïse's father, a financier with ties to the Banque Royale, had secured her entry among these circles. But tonight's guest list was extraordinary. Within the crowd of philosophers and poets, it was said, walked a man who claimed to have lived through every century since the fall of Rome. A master alchemist rumored to distill poison and cure plague with equal ease. Eloise's singular place. Madame Marceau's salon was an elegant refuge from the theater of court, high-ceilinged, with walls painted in soft sage and trimmed in gold leaf. Eloise moved barefoot over the oriental rug to a harp by the window, her fingers tracing its strings absent-mindedly, as she watched rival carriages rolling over glittering cobbles. At 19, Eloise embodied her mother's grace and her father's steely intellect. She spoke Latin and read Newton by candlelight, yet nothing in her pedigree had prepared her for Jacques de Saint-Germain. Eloise's voice drifted through the salon as guests arrived. "Mademoiselle," they would breathe. "Have you heard the Count cured a noble of rheumatic fever in 2 hours?" Others scoffed. "Madame de Pompadour's own physicians cannot match his potions," they whispered. "And yet he walks without a cane, reads without spectacles, and never grows old." The Count's first arrival. Mid-morning light gilded the boulevard when Saint-Germain arrived. His carriage, painted midnight blue and velvet-lined, drew up before the wrought iron gates. Footmen in silver-stitched livery alighted, traversing the wet stones like shadows. Eloise stepped forward, her heart hammering beneath a gown of sapphire satin. He emerged tall, elegant, ageless. Dark lashes framed pale eyes that seemed to hold centuries. His coat of black velvet caught the light, revealing silver embroidery of serpents and stars. A fleur-de-lis brooch pinned his cravat. He offered her a gloved hand, voice smooth as spun silk. "Mademoiselle Marceau, your reputation precedes you. I trust the morning finds you well." Eloise curtsied, meeting his gaze. She sensed two currents beneath his calm, infinite knowledge and a dark undertow. "Count, it is an honor," she replied, voice steady though her pulse raced. They entered the salon to murmurs of surprise and admiration. Saint-Germain's presence commanded silence as he greeted each guest by name. Knights of Malta, Jesuit scholars, a Russian princess traveling incognito. Eloise's father beamed, proud that his daughter could claim such company. Philosophers and potions. As afternoon turned to dusk, Saint-Germain retired to a corner draped in tapestries of the Crusade. He produced a small leather satchel and withdrew glass vials of liquid, one shining copper red, another a pale luminous gold. He explained their properties: tinctures distilled under precise lunar phases, infused with herbs gathered at dawn. Philosophers scribbled notes, while mystics murmured their regrets at not finding a place in his inner circle. Eloise watched from across the room as Saint-Germain poured a drop of golden elixir onto a silver spoon, inhaled its scent, and smiled with indescribable pleasure. He offered it to her father, who hesitated, then drank. Within moments, lines of fatigue left the financier's face. He straightened, eyes bright. A gasp rippled through the salon. "Miracle!" exclaimed Madame de Beauharnais. "By what art you achieve this?" Germain inclined his head, lips curved in a secretive smile. "Alchemy is but the science of transformation, mademoiselle. Matter yields to will, and time." He paused, gaze drifting to Eloise. "Time answers only to discovery." Stakes in the shadows. Eloise's pulse quickened. She sensed that knowledge came at a price. The potion that restored youth could be the same that condemned a soul. As guests circled to glimpse more, Eloise slipped away to the garden's moonlit fountain. She paused by the carved stone basin, its water reflecting the distorted silhouettes of orange blossoms and cypress arches. A soft footstep. Saint-Germain joined her, carrying an ornate silver mirror. He held it at arm's length as though he expected it to reveal more than her face. "Look deeper, Eloise," he murmured. "The surface shows only what time allows. Depth reveals what time conceals." Her reflection shimmered in the moonlight, pale, knowing, but with eyes wider than before. She realized that her life, her love, her future was entwined with this man's secret. The Count's gaze held hers, an unspoken question. Will you seek the truth of eternity? Eloise's breath caught. The night wind whispered through orange blossom. Somewhere beyond, the Seine's current moved indifferently, as if the world hadn't changed. But for Eloise everything had shifted. In that moment she chose her fate, to follow the Count's immortal path, regardless of the darkness it might bring. As dawn broke over the Hotel de la Pole, Eloise's world had been forever altered. The Count's promise and his peril beckoned her onward into a realm where life and death danced to alchemy's rhythm, and where the greatest risk lay in uncovering a secret that defied mortality itself. Alas, returned to the Chateau de Bellegarde 3 nights later, her cloak drawn tight against the December chill. Moonlight glinted on frosted grass as she slipped past shuttered windows and down a narrow mossy path to a hidden door beneath the great oak ramparts. In her satchel lay the leather-bound journal she had borrowed from the Hotel de la Pole's library, pages filled with alchemical symbols and marginal notes on vitae aeterna. The secret passage. With trembling fingers she traced the rune-etched keyhole in the stone, remembering the Count's parting words. Speak the word of life, she whispered the Latin. Vita. The door groaned open, revealing a stair of rough-hewn limestone descending into darkness. Elias lit a slender taper, and followed. The air grew musty, tinged with herb and iron. Each step echoed like a heartbeat in the silence. At the bottom, a heavy oak door barred her way. Its surface was carved with the same serpent hourglass emblem from Saint-Germain's monogram. She pressed the serpent's eye, an emerald cabochon, and the door swung inward. The vault of alchemy. Torchlight revealed a vaulted chamber lined with shelves of dusty tomes, glass jars, and brass instruments. In the center stood a stone altar draped in black velvet. Upon it lay a scroll sealed with crimson wax, bearing the Count's crest. Eliza's pulse raced as she broke the seal. Unfurling the Codex Immortalis, she read its preamble. To bind the thread of mortality, one must sever the fear of death. The alchemist's vessel, heart willing, yields the elixir which transforms. Illustrations depicted 3 phases: preparation of the red tincture, infusion under a full moon, and ingestion at the hour of midnight. Margin notes. In a script she recognized as Saint-Germain's own hand. Warned of consequences, soul divided, time unmoored, the blood of the willing. Eliza's lantern caught on a small leather pouch pinned to the scroll. Inside, a brittle parchment outlined a ritual involving the blood of the willing, stating that a drop of life offered in sacrifice activated the elixir's potency. Her breath caught. Had she truly consented when she drank that first vial? She rifled through glass vials on a side table. One shimmered with the opalescent fluid, identical to the elixir he had offered. Another contained a dark crimson liquid, stained blood sealed with black wax. A third bore dried petals of night-blooming flowers. Footsteps approached. Eliza froze, hiding the codex beneath her cloak. The door swung open, and Saint-Germain's figure slid into the alcove. Eliza stepped forward, torchlight trembling. I found your codex, the ritual, the sacrifice. He inclined his head, sorrow and pride mingling in his gaze. Confrontation and revelation. Eliza's voice shook. Why me? Why invite me into this darkness? Saint-Germain closed the door, plunging them into torchlit intimacy. Because you possess the courage to bear the truth. He beckoned her to the altar. Place your hand upon the serpent's hourglass. Obeying, Eliza pressed her palm to the carved symbol. A hollow click sounded. A hidden compartment slid open, revealing a small obsidian dagger and a vial etched with Latin. Sanguis animi, blood of the pact demands your offering, the Count whispered. Just a drop, no more. Eliza stared at the ritual tools. The dagger's edge glinted like a promise of pain. She fought a surge of fear, but the prospect of endless days with him, of knowledge unbound by time, tugged at her heart. "If I refuse?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. Saint Germain's face darkened. He turned to a brass basin boiling with sweet-scented steam. "The elixir is already prepared. Only the final spark remains." The choice. Eliza's mind whirled. She recalled her father's lament at the Hotel de la Pole, his hope that her future would be bound by purpose, not mere longevity. She trembled, remembering the first taste of the elixir's warmth on her tongue. Immortality, a gilded cage of eternal life, perhaps haunted by the Count's own solitude. "Show me," she breathed, voice steadying. "Show me the path. Then I decide." Saint Germain studied her expression, inscrutable. He poured 2 drops of ruby blood into the basin, stirring the opal elixir until it glowed like dawn's first light. "Drink this," he said, extending a crystal cup. "Then the pact is sealed. Beyond this you will share my destiny." Eliza took the cup, feeling its frosted surface cool beneath her fingertips. She raised it to her lips as the chamber's torches flickered. Eve of eternity. In that breathless moment, the chamber's tapestries seemed to ripple, and unseen wind whispered through the vault's arches. A distant chime, midnight, rang on stone walls. Eliza paused, gazing at the Count, whose ageless face bore both invitation and warning. "To drink," she murmured, heart in her throat, "is to embrace forever. But at what cost?" Lightning flashed through the narrow slit of a window high above, illuminating the chamber's ancient runes in stark white. Eliza swallowed hard, and raised her gaze to Saint Germain, his eyes shining like twin stars. She tilted the cup back, feeling the elixir's warmth flood her senses, and the first tremor of something ancient and unbreakable binding their fates together. As the liquid touched her lips, the chamber exhaled, a gentle tremor. Shadows coalesced around the altar, and Saint Germain's lips curved into a solemn smile. The pact was sealed. Eliza's destiny intertwined with the Count's immortal journey, a path from which there would be no return. Eloise's vision swam as she raised the crystal cup to her lips, the opalescent elixir's warmth flooding her veins. Saint Germain's torchlight danced on the vaulted ceiling, casting his shadow taller than life. Beneath the serpent hourglass emblem, the marble altar pulsed with an otherworldly glow. Preparation of the elements. Saint Germain stepped back and began the ritual incantation, his voice resonant and measured. "Spiritus vitae, vocarte volo, corpus meum, tempus tuum lux et aeternitas." He stirred the basin thrice, the elixir's surface rippling like liquid starlight. Around them, glass vials emitted incense, myrrh, frankincense, and powdered lotus, thickening the air with ancient fragrances. Eloise's heart thundered in her chest as she felt the world constrict to this hidden chamber, the blood of the willing. Saint Germain produced the obsidian dagger, its polished surface swallowing torchlight. He held it aloft, the blade's edge gleaming. Their eyes met, his calm, ageless, hers fiery with resolve. Gently, he guided her hand to the dagger's guard. "Inflict but a single drop," he whispered, "that your will may marry the stone of ages." Eloise nodded, drawing a shallow line across her palm. Pain flared, sharp and real. A drop of blood welled and fell into the elixir with a soft sizzle. The mixture flared brighter, as though ignited by her life's spark. Invocation of the elements. Saint Germain raised his hands to the cavernous ceiling, tracing an invisible sigil. In fluent Latin he intoned, "Terra, ignis, air, aqua, canta hallucinatum et stellae audium, tempus sudat, vitae, mors desertus relinquatur." His words reverberated through the stone. The jars on the shelves rattled. The basin's luminescence grew so intense that Eloise winced. A low hum, like 1,000 distant chimes, filled her ears. The elixir's baptism. Saint Germain offered the cup once more. Eloise accepted, lips trembling. She drank, tasting molten light, sweet with almond, bitter with blood. She felt her pulse quicken, then slow. Warmth gave way to a profound stillness. Doors of perception swung open, and she sensed centuries unfolding in a single breath. Her vision blurred. The vaulted chamber morphed into a Roman basilica, then a medieval alchemist's workshop, then a glittering Georgian salon. She saw Germain at each juncture unchanged, and always at work on the elixir. In one flash, she witnessed his alchemy transmutation of mercury to gold, then the healing of a plague-stricken baron with but a drop of tincture. The price of eternity. The vision snapped away. Eloise gasped, staggering back. A bead of sweat rolled down her temple. Saint Germain caught her arm, guiding her to the altar's edge. "You have seen truth beyond mortal ken," he said softly. "Now you share the fountain of life." Eloise's legs trembled. She touched her wrist. Her skin glowed faintly, veins bright as silver threads. A dizzy elation filled her lungs, swiftly undercut by a chill dread. "I feel unbound," she whispered. "Yet, what have I lost?" Saint Germain's gaze darkened with ancient sorrow. "Time's gift demands sacrifice. You are free from decay, but bound to this world's tapestry. Mortals you love will wither, your heart will bear their absence." Emotional apex. Eloise's breath caught. She thought of her parents, aging day by day. She thought of friends who would grow old and die. A sob caught in her throat. "I did this for love," she began, voice cracking. Saint Germain gently lifted her chin. "Love endures beyond flesh. In the span of centuries, bonds become rarer and more precious. See beyond your grief. Embrace the infinite." Tears brimmed in Eloise's eyes as the reality of eternity's loneliness crashed upon her. The chamber's glow intensified, then softened into a cradle of radiance around them both. The binding seal. Saint Germain produced a slender parchment, an oath of binding. With a feathered quill, Eloise inscribed her name, and the date in spidery script. Eloisa, Marceau, de Saint-Fidant. In perpetuum. She pressed her bloodied palm onto the seal. It adhered like living leather, then cured in an instant. An indelible mark on the parchment and her soul. Transformation's aftermath. The basin's luminescence faded. Shelves ceased rattling. The chamber stilled. Eloise reached for the vial containing her blood-stained dagger. She felt the cold steel, unyielding and real. A final chord of the ritual song echoed in the vault. Saint Germain extinguished the torches with a gesture. Darkness swallowed them, leaving only the soft pulse of Eloise's newfound heartbeat. "Welcome," he whispered in the void, "to life without end." Exiting the vault, hand in hand they climbed the spiral steps. Each footfall resonated like a funeral toll, her old life closing forever. At the garden's edge, snow began to drift, laying silver dust on ivy leaves. Eloise inhaled the crisp air, lungs clear, senses heightened. In the sky, stars blazed with unnatural clarity. As the chateau's doors closed behind them, Eloise gazed at her reflection in a frozen fountain. No mirror could show the years she would never age, the pack's secret woven into her flesh. "My love," the Count murmured, placing a hand at her waist. "Tonight, death has lost its dominion." Eloise's lips curved into a fragile smile, hope intertwined with dread. She stepped forward into the moonlit world, centuries awaiting her dawn. Eloise awoke before dawn, her finger brushing the delicate scar on her palm where the pact had been sealed. Moonlight filtered through frost-lined windows of her bedchamber, illuminating her porcelain skin, unchanged by time's passing. Yesterday's aches were gone, fatigue a distant memory. A thrill of power coursed through her veins, the euphoria of immortality. At breakfast in the Hotel de la Pole, Eloise moved with effortless grace. Courtiers greeted her with fresh admiration. She sipped white tea and felt a surge of vitality far beyond her 19 years. "Mademoiselle," whispered Madame de Beauharnais, "you glow brighter than a sparkler on Bastille Day." Eloise only smiled, recalling the elixir's warmth. She found Germain waiting in the salon shadows. "How do you feel?" he asked, voice low. "Limitless," Elias breathed. "1,000 dawns could not weary me." He nodded, eyes reflecting pride and ancient sorrow. Demonstrations of power. Word spread of Elias's miraculous recovery from a summer cold. She volunteered to visit the infirmary at Hotel Dieu. Sisters gathered as Elias inhaled tinctures of lavender and drank a vial of violet elixir. Within minutes, a feverish child's flushed cheeks cleared, ailing arms straightened. A collective gasp rose. "It is witchcraft. No miracle." Elias waved them back to prayers, heart pounding at her own capacity to heal. News leapt from Paris to Versailles. The Count's chosen protégé could mend fractures of bone and spirit alike. The thrill of influence. With each demonstration, Elias's confidence soared. Invitations to royal salon arrived each morning. Spain's ambassador, the Duchess of Chartres, German princes. At one gala she turned aside a duel by calming two enraged chevaliers with a gentle word, her voice richer than any plea. In the Grand Gallery of Versailles, under gilded chandeliers, she moved among Louis the courtiers like phantasmic royalty. Each encounter deepened her sense of triumph and bound her ever tighter to Saint Germain's design. The first cracks of dread. Yet beneath the euphoria, a tremor of dread stirred. That evening, in the Count's private chambers, she gazed at her reflection in a silver hand mirror. The face that stared back was perfect, yet the eyes looked distant. "You seem weary," Saint Germain observed. "I am more alive than ever," she replied, voice hollow. He placed a hand on her shoulder. "Eternity is not a garment one wears lightly." His words, meant as caution, echoed in her mind. Fading bonds. Elias wrote in her journal, how friends aged before her, how laughter turned to sadness. Madame de la Motte's cheeks hollowed. "The boy I cured now walks with a grandfather's limp. Each heartbeat primes me for centuries of love." When she visited her family home, her parents stroked her cheek, seeing nothing new but noting that she grew distant, as though she watched them through a glass wall. They whispered among themselves, calling her cold and remote. Their wrinkles and white hair haunted Eliza's sleeping hours. The toll on the mind. Late at night, she began to experience unsettling visions. Whispers in the Hotel de la Pole's empty corridors. Voices chanting Latin beckoning her deeper into hidden vault. Flickers of movement in mirrors that should have reflected only her solitary form. Dreams of centuries past. Of wars and plagues she had not lived through but somehow remembered. These phantoms left her gasping awake, heart pounding, convinced the walls themselves were watching. Growing isolation. As weeks passed, Elias found solace only with Saint Germain. In his company, her purpose felt anchored. They studied manuscripts by candlelight, distilled new alchemical compounds, and spoke of grand designs, extending elixir to worthy heirs of Europe's throne. Outside, even the Marceau household felt stale. At a masked ball in the Tuileries Gardens, she felt eyes track her every step. Guests recoiled when she passed too close, sensing something unnatural. Despite her youth, bonfires crackled along the promenades. Torchlight revealed haunted expressions. Elias realized she had become legend incarnate, admired, feared, and always apart. Consequences unleashed. The real cost struck when Eliza's childhood friend Renee, jealous of Eliza's ascendancy, attempted to steal a sample of the elixir. In the Hotel de la Pole's garden, Renee thrust her hand into Eliza's cloak, younger but desperate, spilling a few drops onto her palm. The liquid hissed, and Renee's skin boiled before her eyes. Eliza extinguished the vial in a fountain, tears mingling with Renee's scream. Guarded servants dragged Renee away, her hands scarred, her mind shattered. Eliza collapsed beside the fountain, horror suffusing her veins. "This is what I have become," she wept. "A bringer of pain, not salvation." Germain knelt, holding her still. "Power demands its toll," he murmured. compassion your burden, immortality your curse, a reckoning of the heart. Eliza's spirit fractured between pride in her gift and revulsion at its shadow. She withdrew to the Chateau de Bellegarde's highest tower, gazing down at Paris's luminous expanse. Below, carriages rattled. Life pulsed, unaware of her dilemma. In the tower's chapel, she prayed, candles guttering as though wind blown. She pleaded for release from unending days, for her heart to be freed from the lonely pact. A distant choir of voices in her mind answered with hollow laughter. At dawn, Saint Germain found her there. Elise turned, eyes red-rimmed. I regret the price. I did not know I would carve eternity in isolation. He offered her a small parchment, a clause of reversal he had discovered in the Codex Immortalis. There exists a counter-rite, masked by time's shadow, requiring the blood of the immortal, and the tear of true sorrow. Elise stared, the glimmer of hope warred with her fear. Could she undo the pact, or was this another illusion, another cruel tease of mortal longing? Dawning resolve, Elise folded the parchment in her palm, heart steeled by sorrow and resolve. She would find the counter-rite or perish trying, yet knew that retaliation might demand more than she dared pay. Lowering her gaze to the rising sun, Elise whispered, "If eternity binds me, then I shall wield it to restore what was lost, or end it at last." In that moment, the tower's doors clanged shut behind Saint Germain. Two figures poised on the cusp of a destiny they could neither foresee nor escape. Eliza's journey through euphoria, horror and resolve marked the true dawn of her immortal life, one where power, love and dread intertwined, as inexorably as the pact that bound her soul. Eliza's eyes snapped open in the pre-dawn gloom of her tower chamber. The parchment detailing the counter-rite lay crumpled on her nightstand, its promise of salvation etched in trembling ink. But before she could rise, a frigid draft extinguished the lone candle. In the silence, a faint chorus of whispers drifted up from the corridor. Voices she recognized as those of the Hotel de la Pole's past victims. Rene's agonized cry, the infirmary child's gasp, even the Count's own lament. First blood among the innocent. That morning, Paris awoke to horror. News spread that Madame de la Motte, who had hosted Eliza's first grand demonstration, was found sprawled in her drawing room, pale face frozen in terror. Her maid reported seeing a figure in black velvet glide through the paneled walls, eyes glowing like coals, leaving behind a single silver hair, and a whisper, "Life unpaid must claim its due." Within hours, other prominent salons reported sightings of a shadowy woman, her tears like liquid silver, wandering beneath chandeliers before vanishing through locked doors. The Count himself appeared at Hotel de la Pole, grave-faced. "The contract demands balance," he said, voice hollow. "Your bond has summoned old debts." Unleashing the spirits, that night, Eloise descended to the hidden vault, lantern in hand. The marble altar lay cold and empty. She found only the silver vial, blood-soaked, and a single line scrawled on the Codex Immortalis's final page. "When the willing bind fate, the forsaken shall seek restitution." No hint of the dagger or the basin. Panic spiked in her chest. As she turned to flee, a pale figure drifted out of the shadows, her own reflection in spectral form, eyes void of warmth. Eloise gasped. The phantom reached for her, expression twisted in sorrow. Before she could scream, the ghost dissolved into a swirl of ash and cold wind. Hauntings in the halls, corridors of the Hotel de la Pole, filled with moans and rattling chains. Portraits of ancestors bled tears of wax. Hollow howls echoed beneath gilded arches. At the Hotel Dieu infirmary, recovered patients insisted on barricading doors, claiming unseen hands tugged at their blankets and chanting voices lulled them toward death. Physicians found wards strewn with pillows, carved in arcane runes. Count's desperate measures. Germain convened a council in his private salon. Eloise, two loyal aides and Father Villeneuve, A Jesuit versed in exorcism. The Count slammed a brass-bound volume onto the table. The Grimoire of Azeth, its pages detailing rites to bind unrested souls. Yet every attempted ritual ended in collapse. Candles exploded, incense turned to ash, and Father Villeneuve fell to his knees, babbling in Latin curses that would mature into French pleas. Mercy, mercy on these poor souls. Eloise realized the Pact's backlash could not be sealed by scripture or ceremony alone. The spirit sought something far deeper: justice. Victims of retribution. One by one, Paris's elite were struck down. Marquis de Villiers was found locked in his study, eyes sightless, muttering Count's name. Baroness de Crest collapsed at a soiree, a phantom silhouette hovering behind her before draining her voice. She would never speak again. Each tragedy bore the same signature: victims harassed by a vision of Eloise's spectral double, or by a martial figure in midnight velvet. Newspapers whispered of a plague of ghosts, and the city's clergy held emergency vigils. Eloise's torment. Haunted by guilt, Eloise retreated to the Seine's banks at dawn. She stared at her own reflection in the still water, seeing not Eloise Marceau, but the pact-bound Immortal, whose footsteps trailed sorrow. A sudden splash beside her revealed a shape in tattered finery, the ghost of Renee, eyes hollow. She offered Eloise the black wax vial, shaking her head. You drank of life, but I drank of regret. Renee vanished in a swirl of petals. Eloise sank to her knees, sobbed. Her tears fell on the vial's stopper. Ruby droplets sizzled. Descent into the crypt. Determined to end the curse, Eloise and Saint-Germain braved the chateau's ancient crypt beneath the chapel. They descended spiral steps, slick with moss. The walls were carved with Masonic symbols and Latin phrases warning of unholy bargains. At the crypt's heart lay a stone sarcophagus, its lid adorned with the Count's crest. Saint-Germain hesitated. Here lies not death, but the hinge of fate, he whispered. Eloise produced the obsidian dagger. As she raised it, the air pulsed with wails. The sarcophagus lid slid open, revealing not bones but a mirror of black glass. In its depths Eloise saw her own mournful visage, eyes shimmering with centuries of tears. Confronting the curse, Eloise pressed the dagger's blade to the mirror's surface. It cracked with a thunderous snap. Phantom hands reached through the fractures, tugging her toward the void. Saint-Germain chanted, In sanguine vitae, in lacrima doloris, liberamus iste enim. The Count poured the silver-stained blood from Eloise's palm onto the mirror. Spectral figures writhed as if burned by acid. A chorus of anguished shrieks filled the crypt as the ghosts recoiled, then vanished, drawn back through the mirror's crack. Aftermath of the binding, silence swallowed the crypt. The mirror lay shattered, black shards scattered like spilled ink. Eloise collapsed against Saint-Germain's coat, trembling. He gathered her in his arms. Their debt is paid, he murmured, but ours may yet remain. They rose, footprints echoing on cold stone. Above, the chapel bells tolled sunrise, 6 strokes of a new day, returning to the light. In the weeks that followed, Paris's nightmares receded. Tassels ceased, dragging down empty halls. Wards at the Hotel Dieu fell silent, but the city's laughter carried an edge of caution. Eloise noticed a flicker of fear when courtiers spoke her name. One morning, Eloise and the Count stood on the terrace of Hotel de la Pau. Sunrise gilded the spires of Sacré-Cœur in the distance. The curse's flames have died, Eloise said softly. Saint-Germain nodded, gaze distant. For now, he touched the seal on her palm. It had faded to a silvery thread. Eloise inhaled the crisp air, free at last from specters, yet bound forever to a life shadowed by the darkness she had unleashed. In the aftermath of retribution, Eloise learned that immortality offered not just endless life, but endless responsibility. The ghosts of her own choices taught her that power without compassion breeds despair, and that the greatest haunting may lie within one's own soul. Long after Eloise and the Count vanished from Parisian rumor, Scholars and secret societies turn to tangible clues to piece together the truth behind Saint Germain's immortality. From hidden crypts beneath forgotten chapels to dusty archives in royal libraries, a blend of archaeology, forensic chemistry, and archival sleuthing has shed eerie light on the centuries-old pact. The vault beneath Château de Bellegarde. In 1892, a team of amateur antiquarians discovered a concealed entrance in the chateau's west wing. Behind collapsed masonry lay a rubble-filled passage leading to Eloise's long-lost alchemical vault. Within, battered stone shelves still held fragments of the Codex Immortalis, charred parchment doodled with Latin incantations. Modern conservators stabilized delicate pages with humidified chambers and infrared imaging, revealing marginal notes by Eloise in faded copperplate calculations of dosage, botanical recipes, and a final lament: eternity binds, but sorrow frees the soul. Forensic analysis of the vials. In 1937, 2 crystal vials surfaced in a private Paris collection, one containing a golden residue, the other crimson sediment. Using gas chromatography mass spectrometry (GCMS), chemists identified traces of mercury, dragon's blood resin from ancient Dracacina sap, and night-blooming cereus extract, compounds known in historical alchemy. The crimson vial bore peptide fragments consistent with human hemoglobin, confirming that Eloise's own blood served as a catalyst. The Marceau family archive. Descendants of the Marceau line donated family papers to the Bibliothèque Nationale de France. Among ledgers and correspondence lay personal letters from Eloise to her father, penned in the months after the ritual. She described nights filled with whispered shadows and burning empathy, begging him to safeguard her journal. One letter mentions a hidden counterrite codex stored in the Marceau chapel, never located but referenced in other documents as requiring the tear of true sorrow. Rediscovered crypt inscriptions. In 1974, restoration of the Hôtel Dieu's medieval crypt uncovered a slate plaque engraved with Masonic ciphers and the serpent hourglass emblem. Beneath it lay a white marble sarcophagus inscribed, "Here sleeps one who chased the red dawn beyond mortality's gate." Reader, beware the mirror's shard. Although empty, the crypt yielded silver-toned hairs and threads of funeral lace, tangible relics of the Count's disappearing act. Forensic hair analysis matched the genetic profile of a known Marceau descendant, suggesting Eloise's later presence in the crypt. Eerie echoes in modern archives. Digital archivists at the Sorbonne cataloged dozens of anonymous 18th-century guest lists marked curatorial, listing attendees who claimed to witness the Count's alchemical feat. Cross-referencing these with parish death registers reveals that several guests simply vanished within months. No burial records, no wills probated. Their names remain etched only on brittle paper and whispered among esoteric circles. The Codex's final fragment. In 2018, a private collector unveiled the last piece of the counterrite codex, a single vellum leaf inscribed with the line, "A life undone by love's lament restores the balance, once betrayed." Micro-XRF scanning shows invisible underink, a hidden clause hinting that only Eloise's own sorrow, perhaps at the death of one she could not save, could fully break the pact. These investigations reveal that Saint Germain's legend is more than myth. It is woven into stone, blood, and ink. The hidden crypts and archives stand as silent witnesses to a forbidden alchemy, a reminder that some secrets once unearthed echo through time in the fragile shell of human longing. Eloise Marceau's journey into the alchemical unknown reminds us that the quest for eternal life is as old as civilization itself, and that every promise of power carries an equal measure of peril. Through candlelit confessions, hidden scrolls, and blood-scented rituals, we've witnessed how love and ambition led a brilliant young woman to bind her fate with a count who had already outlived kings and kingdoms. Immortality and its price. Saint Germain's elixir granted Eloise the gift of unending days, yet each sunrise brought fresh sorrow. Friends aged and died. Innocent curiosities turned to tragedy, and her heart trembled under the weight of centuries. In seeking to conquer time, Eloise discovered that life without end can be a lonely expanse, an echo chamber, where every lost soul becomes a haunting reminder of what was sacrificed. Obsession and consequence. From the vaulted crypts beneath Bellegarde to the grand salons of Versailles, obsession propelled Eloise and the Count into forbidden knowledge. Yet the same alchemy that healed gout and vanished fevers also unleashed retribution. Spectral apparitions, tormented guests, and the bitter realization that the blood of the willing can feed neither love nor redemption without consequence. The dual nature of power. Eloise's arc illustrates that power is neither inherently divine nor demonic. It reflects the heart that wields it. In her hands, the elixir first symbolized liberation, then became a burden. Germain himself embodied this paradox, a man whose mastery over life and death rendered him both savior and specter. Now we turn to you, our curious travelers across time and myth. Or is her soul bound as the Count's, forever wandering between life and oblivion? Which aspect of the ritual struck you most? The crucible of blood, the astrological alignments, or the heartbreak wrought in its aftermath? If you had the vial of Vita Aeterni in your hands, would you drink? What price would you be willing or unwilling to pay? Share your theories, your own haunting encounters, or your reflections on the nature of mortality in the comments below. We may feature the most provocative ideas in our next deep dive into history's darkest secrets. If Eloise's tale stirred your imagination, please like this video and subscribe for more stories where love, power, and mystery intersect. Hit that notification bell so you won't miss our next episode. Aidan and 23 Cornwall, the Holloway Sisters, secrets whispered behind convent walls. Or faith, sisterhood, and a blood-bound vow unleash horrors long buried beneath hallowed stone. Until then, remember, some doors open only once, and once you step through, the light of dawn may never find you again.